Let's take a look at question 3C. This is somewhat like question 3B, but we have to do the setup slightly different. So what is the probability that one of their offspring will have the genotype big A, big B, big C, big D, little d, and big E, little e? And we have the genotypes of the parents up here that we can see. And what we now need to focus is how can we figure out the probability that these two parents, when they have a kid, will have a kid that has this particular genotype. So let's start with the A's. In order to figure out this, we need to figure out what is the probability that the kid will have big A, little a, given what the parents have. Now there's two possible ways in which the kid could get big A, little a. The first is that he could get big A from individual 1 and little a from individual 2. The other option is that this kid gets little a from individual 1 and big A from individual 2. These two possibilities would lead to the desired genotype of big A, little a in that offspring. So let's calculate the probabilities of each of these things happening independently. So what is the probability that individual 1 will pass on big A? That is a half. And what is the probability that individual 2 will pass on little a? That is a half. So what is the probability that this offspring is going to get big A from individual 1 and little a from individual 2? Because we have that and, we're going to multiply, and that is 1/4. Now let's take a look at this scenario. What is the probability that individual 1 is going to pass on little a? That is a half. And what is the probability of individual 2 passing on big A? That is a half. So what's the probability that the offspring is going to get both of these combinations? We're going to multiply, and we're going to get 1/4. Now, because both of these scenarios are potentials, we need to figure out what is the possibility of either the first scenario or the second scenario occurring. And so a little tip when you're looking at these probability types of questions. When you can sub in the word and, you're typically going to multiply, just like we did to figure out these possibilities. When you can look at or sub in the word or, we're going to add. And so this case, we're going to look at what is the probability that the offspring will get this combination or this combination. So that is a 4th plus a 4th, which is going to be 1/2. All right, so the probability of the offspring getting big A, little a is a half. Now let's look at the probability of the offspring getting big B, little b. So for this, it's a little bit more straightforward because we know that individual 1 has to pass on little b. There is no other option. So there's only one scenario. Big B has to come from individual 2. Little b has to come from individual 1 if we're interested in this allele combination. So what is the probability that this is all going to happen? Well, it is a half times 1, and that is a half. Okay. Let's look at the C's. We are interested in big C, little c combination. So when we take a look here, we can see that individual 2 only has big C's to pass on. So this has to be passed on by individual 2, which means that little c must get passed on by individual 1. So what is the probability that individual 2 will pass on a big C? That is 1. What is the probability that individual 1 will pass on little c? That is a half. And so our probability for getting that allele combination in C is a half. Now let's take a look at D. We're interested in big D, little d. Again, we have a homozygous here for big D for individual 1, so it has to be individual 1 and 2. The probability of individual 1 passing on big D is 1. The probability of individual 2 passing on little d is a half. So we are at a half. Now we have big E, little e. And this is going to be a similar scenario because both individuals are heterozygotes here that we did for A. This can either be by individual 1 and individual 2, or this is also a possible scenario. So we have to calculate these differently. What is the probability of big E from individual 1 is a half, and the probability of individual 2 passing on little e is a half. So we've got a fourth. Then we have individual 1 passing on little e is a half times the individual of big E is a half. Now what is the probability that the offspring is going to get this combination or this combination? That is a fourth plus a fourth, which is a half. Now that we've figured out all of our individuals, all of these individually, we now have to put them together. So what is the probability of getting big A, little a? We calculated that as a half. What is the probability of getting big B, little b? That is a half. What is the probability of getting big C, little c? That is a half. The probability of big D, little d is a half. And the probability of big E, little e is a half. So what is the probability that the offspring is going to get all of these allele combinations? 1/32.